passed through Antigua, he passed through St. Lucia, then he went to Grenada. In Trinidad and Tobago, Santa confused for so much a nice woman throughout the Caribbean. Santa looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife. Santa Wakalaloo, with flying fish and cuckoo. Ella with dictate so tasty, but all they want is so infraroughly. Santa looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife from the Caribbean. In a soca party to see them nice woman shake up their boom see. Santa looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife. He like ginger beer and sorrel, for pastel he does squirrel. In one hand codfish and roast steak, in the next hand a piece of black cake. Looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife, Santa looking for a wife from the Caribbean.
Neighbor, oh, yo, bring out the ham. Neighbor, ay, bring out the ham. Neighbor, oi, bring out the ham. Neighbor, ay, bring out the ham. All I want to do is eat. Bring out the ham. I don't want to know what I meet. Bring out the ham. When I taste good so too fast. Bring out the ham. Is then I just feel it's Christmas.
Ah, yes indeed, Santa looking for a wife, and of course, and continue with the Christmas spirit. And I thought I should, of course, give a kind of what I consider to be northern temperate region a background to tonight's program. I trust that you enjoyed just as I am. And of course, I'm fooling myself. I am not, of course, in a snowbound environment.
A little piece of ham bone to make the stomach right. My husband gone by his mother and left me in a jam. Look me belly in my hand. Give me piece of ham. Neighbor, oh yo yo, bring out the ham. Neighbor, ay 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 ay, bring out the ham. Neighbor, oh yo yo, bring out the ham. Neighbor, ay 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 ay, bring out the ham. All I want to do is eat. Bring out the ham. I don't want no other meat. Bring out the ham. When I taste good so robust. Bring out the ham. It's then I just feel it's Christmas. Bring out the ham. Never hoy hoy hoy. Bring out the ham. Never ay 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 ay. Bring out the ham. Never hoy hoy hoy. Bring out the ham. Never ay 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 ay. Bring out the ham. Christmas does come back once a year. So Christmas is the time everybody has to share. The shoulder delay and don't make no fuss. Don't let a piece of ham come between the both of us. My husband gone by his mother and left me in a jam. Look me belly in my hand. Never give me piece of ham. Never oh yo yo, bring out the ham. Never ay 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 ay, bring out the ham. Never hoy hoy hoy, bring out the ham. Never ay ay.
Ah, yes, and of course, a pleasant good night to all and such. I'll show off a little bit, of course, with the new intro. I really appreciate it, and of course, the artists that assisted me with the entire development. I want to commend them for that beautiful. Of course, it has demonstrated a new look, a new atmosphere, a new, of course, what I consider to be ambience, and at the same time, the aesthetics. The aesthetics seem magnificent. Of course, during the course of tonight's program, you will tell me what you think about it as well. As we continue, of course, to move towards that inevitable. What is that? Of course, the next phase, early next year, is, of course, to communicate with all of the major world leaders so that we can, of course, highlight and, of course, expose and, of course, articulate what the reality is in Trinidad and Tobago, because as you know, Christmas is usually culturally a time for sharing, a time for giving, a time for merriment, of course, as a prelude to Carnival. But of course, these days, with the promises of this government that have not been kept, because we look at the whole question of public servants getting their back pay, so that at least the merchants can, through of course the availability of should I say spending money But that has not materialized, even though, of course, Dr. Rowley, when he made the pronouncement, loving of the persons who would have been subjected to a disappointing delay, when he castigated, when he maligned a PS in the Ministry of Education, saying that that person is saying that the public servants will not be able to get their back pay on time for Christmas, and he was insisting, and of course at the same time looking for petty and of course small and more and what I consider to be modicum political fodder, political benefits, and it, as everything else in the past and in current circumstance, this government has always turned out to be a faux pas and a waste of time. We see, of course, the opposition have made it, of course, very clear, but those government parliamentarians, I'm sure, are upset, but they will, of course, for 30 pieces of silver, betray their own parents, their own family, and of course, if we are extended family, well, you could well imagine the extended family. In other words, they are eating their sour grapes and their poison, and they say nothing. And I think that so coward, so puny, and so, of course, spineless of these individuals, whether they be women or men under the Rowley administration, simply because they want to stay in his good graces. But what they don't understand is that it is inevitable that they too will go down with this sinking ship called the PNM, politically and otherwise. But to be a political combo in the Rowley administration, it appears will give you, of course, a greater leverage and greater consideration. And so it appears they prefer to stay there, whilst, of course, they unleash collectively and individually pain, ache, agony, and of course the treachery that we are seeing characterizing this particular administration. That being as it may, pleasant good night to all and sundry, east, west, north, south, central, our friends in Tobago, and wherever you are, streaming on the World Wide Web. A pleasant good day to you. This is, yes indeed, the Thursday edition of the Corridor Transformation. Your host, Lennox Smith. Of course, tomorrow, as usual, I'm taking the day off. Boy, am I tired. But of course, the show has to go on, and as my mother and father would have said, that man though dead, his work is dead. But if you have a commitment and a dedication, you want to see, of course, that vision and that outcome be the type of outcome you envisage, and you would have started at the commencement. Some of course, some 116 programs ago. And of course, as the Chinese would say, and the great Confucius, that Chinese philosopher, he would say that the longest journey begins with a single step. And boy, have we made strides. Boy, have we learned. Boy, have we, of course, exposed. Boy, have we, of course, inculcated. Boy, have we understood the system of government and the system of the society itself, and what are some of the pitfalls, and clearly what are some of the issues that we must focus upon as a society. And of course, a society nestled in what is called democracy. And democracy is what? Government by the people, of the people, and for the people. Fundamental, and it is inscribed and of course enshrined in our constitution, our Republican constitution. And what we have is a bunch of opportunistic political parasites who pretend to be ignoramus, and of course who pretend that they are not human, because of course if they were, they would not of course unleash or at least generate a high degree of protestation when these evil policies and programs would have been meted out, whether it be, of course, the taking away of laptops, whether it be, of course, the decrease in opportunities for the food card the food card, and as well the food, or should I say the lunches in school, and of course the situation where they prefer not to focus on the expansion or the completion of school buildings, but instead they will take our money and then focus on the Red House, focus on the Whitehall, focus on the Stallmeyer's Castle, focus on the president house, and then of course tell us and try to mamagai us by indicating that tourists will come to Nelson Street. Let me repeat, tourists will come to Nelson Street because it's there they have deposited unceremoniously the Desperados Steel Orchestra, a symbol of not just excellence in the pan fraternity or in the musical pan arena, but certainly it has turned out, as far as this administration is concerned, to be a poison ivy that was handed to them when they were, of course, moved from Tragridge Road in Port of Spain, Upper Port of Spain, and placed, of course, on Nelson Street, the most arguably dangerous street in Port of Spain, in East Port of Spain, where, of course, every single government that would be of assistance to Trinidad and Tobago, or put another way, where the residents, the citizens of these countries, whether it be Canada, whether it be the United States, whether it be of course France, whether it be Germany, whether it be even Japan, whether it be the United Kingdom, would have known, and of course issue advisory to their own residents not to come to Trinidad. But if you do, whether for investment or as a tourist, please do not go to Nelson Street. Do not go to Nelson Street. These governments tell their residents, do not go to Nelson Street. And in spite of that, and probably because of that, because of course what we have is a country that internationally is known to be the sixth most dangerous place in the world. Trinidad and Tobago, the most dangerous place in the world, sixth spot, coming across sixth in the 190 something countries of the world. But what is significant here is that since the advent of the Rowley administration, when we could have had, of course, the persons at least braving and in spite of and wanted to come to our warmth and the sunny climate, and of course the very enticing beaches, whether it be in Trinidad or in Tobago, we see that the drying up of foreign direct investment, at least outside of the petrochemical and of course oil industries, they simply decided not to. And obviously, one cannot blame them because their governments are telling them don't come to Trinidad because it is too damn violent. And worse yet, you have a government that is so reckless and so brutal and so insensitive that even their own citizens, whether it be in the area of the extension of the highway to Point Fortin, I am talking here about, of course, OAS and the fact that they withdrew the money that could have been spent to them so that the entire highway could have been completed for the $5 to $7 billion that was estimated back during, of course, the Kamala Prasad-Bissessa administration between 2010 and 2015. Guess what? Rowley frustrated the OAS, the company that was hired to do the job, even though they started and were considered under the previous PNM administration, of which Rowley was a part, and of course headed by then deceased Patrick Manning. But yet still, when he came into office, in order to manifest our delusion, he then of course stopped paying them, stopped the payment, and of course any prudent business person in such circumstance would want to cut their loss, and so they did, and left the damn project and went away. Of course, Rowley taking advantage again. He seemed to have an uncanny ability to, of course, try to take blood out of stone. You know what I say Rowley have a propensity, this administration, to try to take blood out of stone. What do I mean by that? Well, having orchestrated the departure of OAS, the company, the substantive, the central, the main contractor for the highway to Point Fortin, he then pursued, of course, another course of action because the opportunity just presented itself, and he recklessly and without thinking and without, of course, any serious analysis, but only like a bull in a china shop, only to get a political advantage. He then, of course, says that he sent Stuart Young, his sidekick, all over the world to get back about $1 billion that turned out to be the money that the OAS put up to, of course, secure the contract. And, of course, we have to give credit and all commendations to the Kamala Persad-Bissessar administration for, of course, making certain that they protected the interests of Trinidad and Tobago and the population and the citizens. And here Rowley went to get that money, and somewhat 7 years afterwards he now has to pay it back, and then blaming everybody else except his foolish and, of course, contemptuous and wicked and Kobo-like political Kobo-like proclivity that it turned out like the dog and the bone. He went and he dive at his own shadow and end up with nothing. Well, that is Rowley under the PNM today. That is Rowley and the PNM today. And when we examine critically, we see that on every score, from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest that you could make, Rowley and they have not been able to step out the box. In other words, they are still at 0. Even though the score is 1 to 10, they can't even make a 1. That is the bizarre state of affairs and the level of management. You see, today I had a discussion with some fellas from the southern part of the country, Labre, Point Fortin, etc. And they were amazed that Dr. Rowley, even though I would be, of course, calling him a rapist and a pedophile every night, they wondered what it is, what is happening here, because no other, and let me say that up front and direct to those sycophants and those persons who are attempting, of course, to molest or to intimidate or to speak ill of those persons who have been, especially the women, of course. And all I have to say in that circumstance is that birds of feather flock together, and therefore such an individual will certainly gravitate to their leader, because if their leader is a blasted rapist and a pedophile and a misogynic individual, meaning that a hater of women, then one could understand why they will be attacking, of course, the weaker sex, so to speak. I am not being sexist. I am not being, of course, arrogant. I am not being, of course, in any way attempting, of course, to downplay the female species, because I believe of the human race, that is, I believe strongly that, of course, side by side, women and men must, of course, be part and parcel of that developmental thrust, that human development thrust that is necessary for the advancement of Trinidad and Tobago and the survival thereof. And why am I saying so? Because I am a firm believer of the United Nations Millennium Goal, and that is, of course, among other things, is to, as far as possible, equate men with women as far as development is concerned, because it is a proven fact. It is a scientific proof that when you live in any society, when you leave out one half of the society, then in one half of the developmental thrust would, of course, be stymied, and, of course, the rate at which you can get the development if you have two rather than one is clearly a debilitating situation for any society. And therefore I commend my sisters and, of course, daughters and, of course, mothers in this society, and never would I, and if, of course, my term weaker sex suggests that I am being, of course, a sexist, I humbly and, of course, unreservedly apologize. That being as it may, let me, of course, start one time with the inevitable pain and ache that will continue over the last 8 years and will continue into 2024. What am I talking about? Well, of course, I must focus on one, property tax, because there are all kinds of course, various, should I say, unpalliative. Palliate meaning, of course, to pain, but unpalliative will mean that it is not pain, but that is what Rowley and Imbert will try to let us believe, or attempt to let us believe, in their usual, of course, theatrics and histrionics in the parliament, saying that no big thing, deferral of your tax payment, your property tax payment, and given the impression that by that term alone, it suggests, because they believe that we are stupid and that we don't know the meaning of deferral, and therefore he attempting, of course, to appease those persons who particularly are in poor circumstance, living, of course, in the from hand to mouth, living, of course, on a paycheck to paycheck, in other words, and then telling us that when you defer the taxes for persons like those, if they end up dying, imagine they're gone dying, or prefer to say that rather than say if their circumstance improve. But if they say if their circumstance improve, they will still have to pay the tax, does not accomplish the hoodwinking. So what they say, if the person dies, then the inheritor, the heir to that estate, will now, of course, have to pay all of the taxes that was, of course, deferred. So deferment means a temporary reprieve, temporary, but at the end of the day, you have to still pay. And they cannot find, Imbert was at wit's end to find words to describe that situation without, of course, revealing the inevitable, but, of course, playing smart with foolishness. Those dunderheads and nincompoops and asinine specimen of inhumanity, whose characteristics and whose inability to empathize simply because they came to the parliament and provided a cushion for themselves by introducing laws that says that if you invest in family apartments, family rental accommodation, suggesting that would supplement their housing shortage problem. But we see it's only Rowley and, of course, Imbert and other members of the cabinet that are benefiting from that. And, of course, what's the main benefit? That for 25 years they pay no taxes. So as we speak, property tax does not apply to Imbert and his investment, as well as Rowley's, who, of course, is now constructing his own family dwelling apartment edifice in, of course, Tobago. Yeah. But it gets worse, people. We have, of course, a company called the Education Facilities Company that Rowley and they created. And it was well served, or should I say serviced, and in itself, by its operation, served the educational, physical part of it, that is, the educational advancement of Trinidad and Tobago during the Kamala Persad-Bissassa administration between 2010 and 2015. Yes, it was a Manning invention. The Education Facilities Company. But Dr. Rowley, when he came into office, inherited several schools under construction or on the way to completion and closed them down. But more than that, never paid the contractors. And when the contractors took him to court because he was making all kinds of excuses, as he is now making as well with respect, of course, to Anand Ramlogan, and of course the 5 companies that he said was part of a cartel. He had, of course, dunderhead, foolish, nincompoopish, of course, and nerd-looking Stuart Young say that they were part of a cartel, whether it be Amalco, whether it be, of course, Namalco and Calco and others. But they were saying they were part of a cartel. Put them in court. Put them in court. And today, the government is owing close to $1 billion to Namalco, one of the companies that they said, because Namalco in turn took the government to court for at least six projects that they weren't paid. And the court says that they are satisfied with the documents, and close to $1 billion Namalco has to be paid by the government. They will not talk about that. They are very silent on those aspects of it. But where it is to do evil, and when, of course, the pain and ache would have been manifested or materialized with, of course, the false evidence that they would present to the courts, we see that they will hype that up and make it look as though they have achieved something fantastic. And so Rowley will say that if 2015 didn't come and 2020 didn't come, that is justification for you putting them in office. That set of viper, evil, and clearly undeserving of government in this country. What are some of the other issues? Well, the small and medium companies that got work to refurbish schools, to build and to improve their toilet facilities and paint some of them, etc. Well, they had to go to court. And when they go to court, over 20 of them, the court said yes, the government is owing them. And guess what? Instead of paying them, Rowley decided, of course, to close down, wind up the company, go to court and wind up the company, so that people are in limbo all over the place. Their money have jumped up for the sake of Rowley, will not get back a cent, because they had made no provisions. And if you're talking about winding up, it means therefore you're saying that the company is bankrupt, you're not going to fund it again, and therefore these people lost their money. They have to pay families who would have invested with them. They will have to pay, of course, the hardware. They have to pay workers that would have, of course, toiled on these jobs up to the point where the jobs were closed down, or indeed in some instances the project was actually finished. But Rowley decided to close down the company. You see, I am making the point because it has implications internationally. That is why, of course, when foreigners come in to invest in any country, they would look at the profile, they would look at the investment climate, they would look at the amiability of the administration and how receptive and conducive the entire environment is for investment. And that is why Rowley has not gotten not a cent in, of course, foreign direct investment outside of the oil, gas, and petrochemical industries. That's why. Because you cannot trust such a government. Just as how the government itself is being advised, don't trust Maduro. Because Maduro, of course, for nearly 100 years, if not over 100 years, remained dormant, remained inactive, remained placid about the Essecubo. And as soon as the oil was discovered, he gone mad. And looking, of course, to fight. Well, of course, we ventilated it last night. I don't think we need to go over that again. The outcome is, of course, that they must go to Brazil to, of course, continue discussions, and that the status quo in terms of their respective position remain the same. Guyana saying that we will go to the International Court of Justice. Venezuela say no, that is not the place. And of course, the International Court of Justice has ruled that nobody speaks war or act as if they are going to engage in war. But of course, we know the Guyanese have the Americans on their side and doing exercises inside of Guyana. And we know, of course, that Maduro has, of course, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, and the Cubans inside of Venezuela. A very interesting, of course, potentially toxic brew indeed. But of course, we hope that there will be no outbreak, but a decision must come. And if it comes in favor of Guyana, I cannot see Maduro, having regard to his bellicose language and the so-called referendum that was established in Venezuela, and the people he say give him the mandate, of course, to pursue. I can't see how the International Court of Justice decision, even and when and if it is in favor of Guyana, he is going to relent. I can't see it. But of course, I raise that issue because of the question of trust. And therefore, not only can we not trust Rowley, but we cannot trust his government, because birds of a feather flock together, and he is the head of this devastatingly dangerous, septic, toxic, and as well as this threat to the democracy of Trinidad and Tobago. The Rowley administration under a PNM edifice called a criminal enterprise. That being as it may, let me say formally, of course, a pleasant good night to all and sundry, east, west, north, south, central, our friends in Tobago, and wherever you are streaming on the World Wide Web, a pleasant good day to you. This is, yes, once again, the corridor transformation. The number to call, of course, call me directly here is, of course, 337-6940, 337-6940, and of course, you can do that right now, only on WhatsApp, and of course, the number to call with respect to any assistance to our hamper. Well, of course, we are winding down, and we are here and there, of course, looking for last minute collections. So we are engaged in that exercise. And if you want to see me directly, no problem, I will make myself available. But that number to call to my assistant is, of course, 336-6594, 336-6594. And, of course, we will continue. Let us go straight, of course, as I said, whatever the Christmas brings, what I consider to be revelry it brings, we must be conscious that 2024 is upon us, and issues like this will certainly manifest itself. Let's look at, of course, the very, very controversial and the very, what I consider to be deceptive and evil tax called property tax that will be upon us and is on the lips of everyone and on the minds of everyone, so much so that it has and should affect our Christmas festivity, the amount of things that you can buy. But of course, at the same time, we take note that the promise of back pay for civil servants has not manifested itself in the way that one would have expected, having regard to Rowley, so-called temporary and what I consider to be fake annoyance, fake vexation, that of course a public servant will say that next year. And of course, mind you, in order to make it look real, as if he could fire any PS, he could complain, but he can't fire them. There is a process within the system to treat with a PS, but instead, because his office holds the head of the public service PS, that particular person was transferred to another ministry, having been sent early on leave, again trying to satisfy the pernicious, evil, wicked, diabolical, vindictive, and nasty characteristic and personality of an evil man who clearly is the devil personified in Trinidad and Tobago contemporary. That being as it may, let's go straight, of course, to understanding this situation. And I want to say, once again, Once again, deception is the order of the day. That is why the PNM has to collapse. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has collapsed. And we must, of course, take note of those facts. That, again, in order to be where he is in 2015, Rowley called it a nasty tax. He said that the residents of Woodbrook, etc., cannot afford $100 increase. Back in 2008, 2009, that's what he said, at a time when we made the most money ever in 2008. Coming out of a COVID now, and the economy taking a nosedive, a drastic nosedive, he is now, of course, imposing a 3% on the remaining portion of money, consequential of calculating every property on the basis of a fictitious and surmised rationale or formula on the basis of rental value. On the basis of rental value, people. And Smith has the audacity, the temerity to come in the parliament and says that looking to divide and rule in the first instance, that is how they operate. So he said that those wealthy people saying that, of course, their properties were erroneously valuated, and that nobody in Westmoreland, for example, is renting any place for $18,000 a month. $18,000 a month, and they said they could hardly get $10,000 now. Of course, the veracity or the truth of that statement, I will not question, and none of us should, because if it is that these people are up in arms against, of course, the government, it serves our own purpose, and it doesn't matter from what quarter. But if they are seeking their own interests by attempting, of course, to question the evaluation, and certainly will be annoyed because they will be paying, according to them, a evaluation that is not just, that is not fair, that is not realistic, then, of course, the efforts since 2015 to identify and to, of course, telegraph to the world and the population that Rowley and they are poison, they are toxic, and they are threatened to the democracy of Trinidad and Tobago, then if they join the fight, and you should have no difficulty, that they too will be feeling the pinch. And even if it may be specious, even though it may be superficial, even though it may not be truth, but the fact that they are prepared, of course, to fight for that and to fight this government, then, of course, we will take all the allies that we can get and all of the sympathizers and all of the support that we can get. So it is crucial, because you see, history is a dangerous thing, because it tells you what is possible. Because remember, when KDs brought out all of the so-called local whites on Abercrombie Street in front of the Red House, and of course led a funeral service and sermon, yes indeed, and of course the Manning administration was trembling. I say there's much more than what Manning did by this Rowley administration to have not just a similar but an overwhelmingly larger and massive collective attempt to tell Rowley it's time to blast it, go. Time to go. Time to go. Let me say, of course, pleasant good night once again. Share. Don't forget to share. Don't forget, of course, to create the kind of noise that is required in order for us to have our voices, collective, individually, as far as NGOs and the CBOs are concerned, and the religious groups. You must, of course, make some noise. You must ensure that the Trinidad and Tobago return to sanity, because the chaos, the mayhem, the bedlam, and the chaotic scenario that Rowley on a day-to-day basis has been engaging in this country to try to deflect attention away from their incompetence, impotence is real. Or they are real. They are real. But let's go straight, of course, to property tax, as I said, and in between, of course, I will be making my comment. But this is what Rowley had to say back in 2015 when he wanted the job. Today, they are making adjustments to the property tax as if it's par for the course, as if these things did not happen. And I say to Andy and Mikey, and they must be playing this particular, it's a short, but a very, I think, poignant and to the point, and to, of course, incisively and psychologically deepen the hatred and the understanding of the level and depth of betrayal that is Rowley and the PNM, and therefore no damn good for the country. And while, of course, they are talking about that and talking about this and talking about the other, and that giving themselves self-praise, and of course engaging in egotistic and of course megalomaniac insanity, frankly, people cannot get $100 or $50 US in the banks, but he is telling us that he went to the boardroom here and went to boardroom there and went all over the world, and then of course unable, of course, to show us why it is that we must, of course, engage in property tax at this point in time. Let's go straight to the line. We have a caller. Pleasant good night. Welcome to the corridor.
Good night, Lennox. Good night to you and to everybody on the chat. Hello?
Yes, hear you loud and clear. Loud and clear.
And she's right. Once you hearing me, and she's to one and all. Lennox, I am so glad tonight that you raised that issue with the property tax. First, let me address point number one. To hear some people say never did anything to stop the property tax is a damn big lie. I don't know what these people is getting lying. Right? What I want to say, we headed too close to Christmas. I wouldn't be disrespectful.
I hear you.
Right? You understand? And before I go any further, I sent you a photo of what was said about Miss Woodbrook to show you, because earlier too you spoke about the disrespect level that some of the women, right?
Both of them flock together. They do
Right.
what the leader do, yeah.
Lennox,
Herd mentality.
That's right. Yeah. Right. I sent you a Photoshop of it, a snapshot, sorry, to show you the disrespect that these PNMites have for women. Right? This was said to Miss Woodbrook yesterday morning on the ground report. And I was so taken up busy that I didn't get a chance to send it for you all.
All right.
But I said it tonight, as you raise that issue tonight of disrespect. They wouldn't come and look, PNM did this first, that first, or the other first for the last 8 years. No, they prefer to come and stink up the women on the chat. Right? No. As I was saying, the liars on them are saying that Kamala, she will never win an next election because she never did anything about property tax.
The People's National
That's her.
Jamais des property tax.
A big
Jamais
thing
des
like
tax.
I
You are telling the population
Yes, sir.
that
Right,
Yeah.
good. Go ahead. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No problem. Yeah. Because from the time Kamala and them came in 2010, she stopped the property tax. She stopped it. They tried to repeal it, but they couldn't repeal it because she exposed the problems they were having with the workers. She explained to us what it was, and it's on the Hansard. What were the problems they were experiencing? We never paid property tax for 13 years. all they come in to say Kamala did nothing. When Kamala and them, when Imbert was threatening people that if they don't pay the property, they'll be jailed, they'll be fined, they'll be this, that, and the other. They went to court and got it stopped. But when they changed some laws, as you rightly say, he liked to play with dots and commas, right? He went to get it changed, and it came back. Now, let me come fast forward now to this morning on the ground report. It was the most amount of BS I heard in a long time. I don't know if people have come to feel that they like to hear themselves, or they like to talk a set of verbal diarrhea. To come and say that Indians have us in the situation we are in today because they went and follow the forms. Now, I sent Andy a voice note. I don't know if he played because I was very busy this morning, up and down, right? But it was very unfair and very disingenuous. But we know they are liars. We know they want to be a seriously sitting on the National Security Board, right? And they can't get it, so they fabricate stories to say that Indians are the cause of it. They have us in this position today. Lennox, you remembered, right? It's not all people signing the forms and filling it out, right? The next one from Tanapuna starts with this crap. But what surprised me is that one of your co-hosts, right? Lennox, we didn't just get property forms. We got it a while now. That was when the threat was going on. People were threatened to fill it out and whatever. Now, we saw photographs, Lennox, you could go back to the archives of The Guardian and whatever, of a mixture of people standing outside City Hall, waiting to deposit their forms in boxes. It wasn't Indians alone. There was a mixture of white, Chinese, red-skinned people. You know that they were Indians. And somebody said it when they interviewed the people. I think it was a man who said it. He filled it because they threatened them. He don't want to go to jail, an elderly gentleman. And that was his sentiment expressed right across the board. Very disingenuous and unfair to say that Indian people alone were filling it out. And reference was also made that it's Indian people run for the vaccines first. That's a lie. We saw the long lines outside the paddocks, outside going down Shagaramas, all over where vaccines were given out. The mixture of people that were there. Why only targeting Indians alone? Was Bash Indian Day or what? This year I tried to get on, and I got cut 3 times. I don't know what was the reason, but I know it was coming down close to the end.
It was nearing 9 o'clock because we didn't
nearing the end of the program.
Yeah,
I realized that. It was nearing the end of the program.
Yes.
But you see, I always say, Lennox, thank God Mikey is the voice of reason. And Mikey did what he said this morning about the bash have to stop. You cannot expect to bash people and they're going to come out in support of you. That is impossible. And I know I am one of those that looking seriously into it now. I am one of those. Now, I always say, Lennox, anybody that is against the PNM, whether it's PNM themselves, whether it's UNC, top whoever, right? Gary Party, now we have Hope, we have whatever we have. Once you're against the PNM, you are opposition. So why single out UNC people? Why single them out? Because a lot of people don't support the PNM. They don't. Why single out the UNC and Indians? And I am telling you here tonight, Lennox, people are getting fed up of that tribe of bashing Indians, especially where the property tax, the vaccines are concerned. It was Indian people alone that went and do it. That was very, as I said, and I will keep saying it, very disingenuous. Across the board, people were threatened. Lennox, we heard it. They were threatened, if you don't take the vaccine, what is going to happen? Some people had the sense not to take it, like me, because I ain't working nowhere. All they don't want me in all this store, no problem. I have a problem with that. And just so we can't go to the grocery and we can't go here, there, and everywhere. They were threatening people. Come on, man, face reality. Don't come here and tell me that it's only Indian people. And all this nonsense. And you know what is so funny, Lennox? Look at what this Rowley's doing to this country. Look at what he's doing. The man destroyed the country. And nobody's bashing him. Is it because necromancy that we're hearing about now from Massey? Because we hear he or she is in Massey? I don't know. I ask a question. Nobody said a word, Lennox. Don't you find that is funny? Everybody that was so vociferous on the so watch, where are they? We know the union get fixed. Fixed TNT get fixed. Plot get fixed. Everybody get fixed. And nobody's saying a word. Nobody's saying a word. But you back the Indians and them for going to fill it out. All who filled out the form for the forgetting that they were threatened. People were threatened that if they don't fill it out, they will be charged. Lennox, I thank you very much for listening to my 2 cents. Take care and have a good night.
Same to you, my dear. Same to you. I mean, you couldn't put it in perspective in terms of laying the foundation for this discussion, because I have always said that this discussion is much more complex. It is deep, it is wide, it is broad, it is high, and we must be able to be very, what I consider, balanced and at the same time rational and factual. I remember being part of that discourse this morning, and my position was that, and still is, that property tax, the intrusion into people's mattress money that you save at home, in order to satisfy this group of what I consider to be not just mercenaries, not just murderers. And I have my reason for saying so. But let me say it one time, because I want to rile up the sycophants and they. A set of political cobos, a set of miscreants or criminals, yes, under an organization called the PNM that is a criminal enterprise. My position is that all of these measures was to target, and still to target, the Indian community. To target the Indian community is a far cry from talking about the belly, etc., etc., etc. It was intended to target. And it is not by accident I am intertwining or it becoming part and parcel of the intrinsic weave of what I consider to be deliberate intent to attack, because it is not by accident either that the Indian community is targeted for home invasions. We have to be real. And it is as a consequence of a criminal group of people who is prepared to use their juggernaut position and the protection of the law that their respective office, including that of the Prime Minister and of course ministers, have under the Constitution. And the fact that they are prepared because they have demonstrated that they are prepared to use the law enforcement agents in order to, of course, accomplish their nefarious, wicked, diabolical, criminalistic ways. I bring to your attention, of course, the OCAC Paul and the limited state of emergency. I bring to your attention the travails of and the pain and ache and agony of Basdio Pandey. I tell you that the magistrate Sherman McNichols and the then Attorney General, as is the case today, it as if it is deja vu, as if it's something that we would have experienced in the past, but in this case, it is real. It is not a dream. It happened already. Basio Pandey was, of course, charged. Yes. But when time comes to give evidence and to deliver the judgment ultimately, it was found out that Sherman McNichols, the magistrate in the matter, who had to decide on the matter, met with John Jeremy, the PNM Attorney General, and they worked out a land deal that was given a state of anxiety to Sherman McNichols. And to put it in a single phrase, Jeremy was reported to have said that finish with the Pandey matter and then we will talk. In other words, that is interpreted because he did take action to resolve Sherman McNichols' problem. Whether the merit of the case or the demerit of the case might have gone differently if, of course, there was not that political intervention is another story that I am not prepared to venture at this point in time, except to say that it could not have been right. It was wrong. It was a breach of procedural as well as natural justice, and that the entire affair was one riddled with corruption and nepotism, cronyism, and of course, clearly conspiracy to imprison Pandey. Let's not waste time. And therefore, I am saying all of that because it is nestled in the fact that the Indian, these people happen to be Indians. But as I said specifically, that targeting of the mattress money and property tax, in my view, the Indians have been targeted for that. And I will continue after I take this call. A pleasant good night. Welcome to the corridor. Yes.
A pleasant good night to you, my friend.
Yes.
I just came in and getting tail end of what Santa Cruz was telling you.
Yes.
And you see the dogs, you like to talk by my name.
Yes, go ahead, my friend.
I was real appalled this morning at Andy
Yes.
and Tunapuna. Tunapuna, the stock has set a crap anyway, and I hope you listen, you know. I call it tonight because I might have to go to read the morning, right?
Okay, no problem.
Same thing we always talking about Indian this and Indian that. I wanted to know that it was Kamal Mohammed, Kamaluddin,
Yes.
and Errol Fahabi, Indian people when I had nothing in Trinidad.
Yes.
There are two fellas, and you can ask Basio Pandey or Kamla. They think they sit down next year and bring them side by side. There were two fellas in church, you know. But they made sure that Indians and Hindus and Muslims will get intermarry.
Yes.
And they spread events all over Trinidad. Otherwise, Indian people don't have nothing. So, Tunapuna must remember that. If he knew, that is why Basio Pandey never killed Kamal and them nothing. He knew what he was doing. Making sure that Indian people have money. So when he about talking Indians, he must specify who he's talking about. Now, today Indians is a different story. You can talk with them. So remember that fella. But the man leave it for now. And he talk a pack of crap this morning, you know.
All right.
I don't know if they send at your media studio or what. You might start talking about Indian people I'll be about food running and all this. What kind of stupidness went on there? He apologized to Indian people don't want it. I call it tonight because I could talk to you, Lennox.
Yes.
You is my friend, and you have cut me off. And what's that to go say he should? The property tax, you have a big office up in the Ruka here.
Yes.
When you pass it, but sure, people line up here, Lennox. It's PNM people. African. And as far as the vaccine concerned, you will remember for your child dog and you go back to it. You make thousands of people come out here, predominantly African, and then come out and say, if there are no more vaccines, I make them go back home. So I don't understand what's going on with Andy this morning, and Tulapuna, but you know, he's a waste of time, you know. Use my partner, and he needs to apologize to Indian people tomorrow. You see what I tell you about them French fuel this morning? The JT Johnson workers? I think that you let's talk about it after. I was a young fella at the time, you know.
Okay.
So I witnessed that. And also, they were older than me, most of them. But I was just people stand up for the rights. And if our researchers say this morning, it's true with these people in Federation Park and so on. If they stand up against him, but and this white legion with him, he will wait with the Alexander.
Yeah.
That property tax thing done. And no police have put any hand on them. There are people that in fighting spirit, that the two other races, major races, African and Indian, they may have that Lennox. They do have it. Lennox, you must go to your way. You know, they're talking about 1%. To identify who they're talking about. Because if you remember, when Kamala was Prime Minister, and she went in the country club, you see the amount of white people that come out to meet you?
Yes.
And she no Prime Minister ever come there. There are people who will vote for Kamala. Right through. In that time, in that seat again, Dr. Khalil was telling that last 6 Sunday.
Yes.
Yes. So you must let these people know when they say 1%. It's a handful of people they're talking about. Because all the people they saw Kamala, up in Marvel and all about. Right, Lennox?
Yes.
I say I must call it tonight. And the Indian community. It don't bother me, Lennox. My mother was Portuguese, so it don't bother me.
Yeah.
You like that for white boy.
Yeah.
Right? You will talk tomorrow.
Yes, yes. Thanks very much for your intervention. You see, there is a difference between rationality and emotionalism. If you talk from the basis of emotions, perception, and what is called ad hominem, you're talking from how you feel. It has its place, but it's also dangerous. And I want to accuse my colleague, and everybody knows that he is extremely emotional. But of course, you see, if I had to take a particular position as he did, I would have had to consider, first and foremost, having been part of the organizing committee and having in fact led the charge, I would have first nestled my argument, my prefacing by first reverting to or reminiscing upon pushback 1, pushback 2, pushback 3. Pushback 4, pushback 5. I would have had to do that in order for me to draw a conclusion like that. Let's go straight to the lines. Pleasant good night. Welcome to the corridor.
Good night, Lennox.
Good night to you.
I'm a first-time caller.
Okay.
I just want to say compliments this season to all listening.
Yes.
And to everyone on the corridor confirming. Now, Lennox, I just wanted to call and compliment you. Because you're the only person, if I should say, have the kahunas or the balls, to admits the truth that is hiding under the carpets in this island.
Yes.
Because it's the first person who opened looking at the tally, looking at the situation, and seeing the type of people who are committing the type of craziness that's happening in our country, bring it down to and talking about land taxes and the property taxes and stuff like that. It really is the Indians who work hard, hide their money.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That is that's a pellucid fact. Go ahead. Sorry about that. You know, I became a bit overwhelmed by your endorsement there. But go ahead. Yes.
It's a conversation. Great. I'm glad for your confirmation and you understanding what I'm saying. But if you look carefully, who are the people who go work the lands, plant the veggies and do whatever? How many, let's talk, how many of our black brothers or cream brothers or brown brothers go out there? It is the East India.
That's right. That's right. That's the reality.
Right. And they do every little menial thing. They clean their own yard, they do that. You will hide their money and eat same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Unlike people like you.
Yes.
We gotta have things, right? So who are the people who are having, as you rightfully put it, the mattress money or the little can behind the little thing?
Of course.
Their kids know what it's like to go to school and wrap that roti baked thing up, right? And eat it. Our kids want a sandwich with spread, chicken spread, and all kinds of things on it. Who get scholarships in this island? Let's talk really here.
Yes.
It is how many black people, let's talk about the African brothers and sisters, how many of them really get it? You understand what I'm saying?
Hello? Yeah, go ahead. I'm hearing you. You asked a question?
All right, and I'm saying, how many and why are people pretending that this doesn't happen?
Exactly.
This is the plate of facts that you are giving. And this is the first time I have called a talk show or a crappy show or something to give my opinion. And I am saying, thank you for having that great big kahuna to stand there openly to say, hey, these are the people being targeted. And as I will just say and endorse what you said, who are getting the home invasions? Let's be honest here.
That's right.
It's the I'm not offended, by the way, but I'm just agreeing with you because it's the first time I have openly heard, this admittance by a host to be so truthful. So I thank you, Lennox, and I want to say to you, continue, and God's blessing upon your life and your family's life for now and a long, long time to come. Waiting to see you in power. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye
Thank
now.
you very much. And all the best, of course, to you, yours, and for the season. And I'm looking forward to see you as well when in power. Because, you heard the caller endorsing, but is there a need for endorsement? There cannot be. Because that is the fact, and that is where I would nestle my argument, that the government has targeted for property tax and for that mattress money scenario, the so-called polymer in exchange for cut notes, which of course they made over $500 million, $500 million that was not collected or exchanged. Why? Because built into the entire exercise as far as that money is concerned, separate and apart from the spurious and facetious and of course sophistry. A songing good argument, but nestled in nothing, is that somehow people were hoarding the $100 bills and engaging, of course, in what? In money laundering and drugs. And I made the argument. And I wanted, of course, and I stressed that Short Young should load up a pirogue with Trinidad and Tobago only $100 bills, stack it up high as he could in that pirogue, and go out in the Gulf of Paria, and one of those drug mules or drug runners from Colombia or Venezuela meet them in the middle of the Gulf of Paria to exchange. He paying them with his currency that he has in the boat, and them, of course, exchanging the drugs. And see if we'll find the boat, the money, and everything else, the engine, to the bottom of the blasted Gulf of Paria. So, in other words, I'm making the point that that was not the reason for that. They came up with the idea to thief people's mattress money. That is what Rowley and them did. Understand that? And they know that the Indians would store their money home. They have a banking phobia, or they prefer to see their monies. And of course, the largest note will be, of course, the denominational, or should I say, the denomination that they would, of course, utilize to save. Not the Africans, not the Chinese, not the Syrians, etc. And the caller is correct, and that came out of a tradition and experience where if they were farmers and so on, they would have had cash transactions, and they would want, of course, to keep their monies home to continue other cash transactions. But at the end of the day, just as any other business, then you always sell at a profit, and therefore, once you sell at a profit, your original input or your savings will increase. It was deliberate. Rowley and them targeted the Indian community for that particular measure. Understand that? And the same thing has occurred with respect to property tax. And what they did, like they did with the money, they then built into it a bunch of measures to frighten, to engage sufficiently any family or any person in such a situation with a high degree of trepidation by saying that they are going to unleash the authorities on them. Let us be real now, man. A pleasant good night. Welcome to the corridor.
Hi, Mr. Smith.
A pleasant good night to you.
Together we aspire, together we achieve. We cannot win this PNM regime by fighting down each other. We have to get together.
That's right.
What is going on in this place? I hear the comrade this morning, Clive New Year's, bring back some history. And it's like, I don't know what's going on in this place. These people and them, it's like the devil take over this country. They're just fighting amongst each other. And the prize to win is right in front of their eyes. Get the rail of this dictatorship, Rowley. Right now, it's like he's just trying to get everything that Kamala put in place. He's shutting down everything. He's making everything mandatory that he could control. And the people just fighting among themselves. What is going on? As I always said back in 1970, You all have all this exposure to go on radio and talk. Granger used to come out and say, look, we having a meeting so and so. Next day, we go and do we thing or whatever and thing. What is going on in Trinidad? The only time I see people come out is for carnival. What is going on? Good night, sir.
Good night to you as well. Good night to you as well. And as I said earlier, if I had to pronounce on taking a position one way or another, I will not be so, what I consider to be absent-minded, for want of a better term, absent-minded. I would not be so oblivious to the fact that I assisted in the formation and creation of pushback 1, pushback 2, pushback 3, pushback 4, pushback 5. And there was an overwhelming contingent or presence of persons of Hindu Tobago stock, if not in the majority. So therefore, it will be disingenuous for me to be so callous as to not to further deepen the analysis as to why the PNM would target the Indian community for these various measures. And it cannot be only because, as some body would say, because they're coward. No, it is wrong to say that. It is wrong. Remember, the juggernaut of the country, the government, the executive, was prepared, of course, to engage in such an intrusive and belligerent and aggressive way, that you have to be able to evaluate this situation properly to draw a conclusion. And the conclusion cannot be one that is wrong and further divisive or upsetting one group on against another. A pleasant good night. Welcome to the corridor.
Hey Lennox, pleasant good night to you and everybody on the live.
Same to you, my friend.
Compliments of the season one time, and we're coming closer to Christmas Day.
Same to you and yours.
Right. So Lennox, this word deception, I gotta realize when people deceiving people is a hell of a thing, you know. That thing, I don't know if that more evil than the devil. Yeah, what going on? Yesterday I went in Price Mart in Romania, right? Now, normally when I go in Price Mart, I like to go by the entertainment center where I have the TV and the DVD players and the tablets and all them things and the music box and whatever. So it have a particular Bluetooth speakers I was looking at called JBL, Boombox 2. Right. So I say by only time I looking at this thing on YouTube, I finally get to see it in live. So I say, right, I'm going to get a little test run and see how it's sounding. So I went and I put my phone on tape and I was running a gospel. I can't remember the name of the artist, but I was playing a gospel called Stomp. Right. And people passing and bawling, hey, this thing singing real good, boy. And I might take a box and you go on with it. And next man pass. He say, what? He say, this thing singing real good, boy. He say, there's anything more. I rather save my money and mountain. I don't come back and take one of that. Now the box is about 2,600.
Yeah.
Right? You know, the music, the song that I have on my phone is a partner man just send that particular song for me. You know that song was altered. Meaning that the song does make any system song like it have plenty bass.
Oh.
And people didn't, you understand? So when the people and them buy the box and they play and they say, but wait now, but this thing wasn't sung in like how that man was playing in Paris Smart Boy, it's because the song what my partner sent for me was altered to make it song heavier than it is normally sung.
Yeah, how it was
And that
recorded,
right
yeah.
there, yeah, and that right there, I get to realize, I say, wait boy, I said, this is so Rowley and them deceiving the people, boy. And when I listen to the original song, it ain't song nothing like what it is I have on my phone. And at that point in time, I get to realize how devious deception is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tragic. It's tragic. It's to the extreme. Can destroy lives and a whole society as we are seeing unfolding before our very eyes.
Yeah. And today when I listen to I forget this man on the gun report, the Tobago, the one who does talk plenty there.
Yes.
The man makes some point there, and I will take him in where he talk about Eric William, how Eric William say that businesses is not for black people, and you're seeing it right in my neighborhood. There's very few black people own big businesses like where the East Indian people just own. And when I listen to the music these young people and I'm listening to, it's not to elevate them, it's not to take them out from the known to the unknown, it's to keep them in poverty, warring and fighting amongst themselves. This thing was planned, this thing was drafted out. But I feel 40 or 50 or 60 years after pass for some kind of new change to take place, because you see this generation today, they ain't had a fighting spirit like those in the 70s and the 60s and in the 50s when they was to go up against Eric William. They ain't had a fighting spirit, and I believe the social media, but like every time people on that social media, it come like them in their own world. Them not in touch with the reality that we live in. So when we see things happening in Trinidad and Tobago and in the region and in the world, them just brush it off. And it ain't affecting them, they ain't bother with it. And that is what going on there. A lot of deception taking place near and far. Locked on and listening.
Yes, indeed. Well, let me just say quickly, in the context of politics, it is called propaganda. Some people make a distinction. Well, you ought to make a distinction, I should say, between propaganda, promotion, and or marketing. Marketing, of course, is a profession. It is an activity where you tell usually the good and very few, if at all, negative about a particular product. You see, because if you only make a mistake with that, your business could bust. So you have to talk as far as possible the truth about your particular product or your service. That is marketing, of course, and the promotion. But where propaganda is concerned, it is a mechanism, it is a philosophy, it is an ideology, it is an activity deployed by political parties across the board, but if the information is disinformation, misinformation, that is permissible, that is permitted with propaganda. And this particular party are talking about in government, are talking about the PNM, has been around for some time, and because of their longevity and their survivability, and while of course they are waning in terms of support, because at one time they got all the seats, you know. I think it's the 1971 elections, if I'm not mistaken. They got all the seats, you know. But they were able, of course, to, as a group, as an entity, to adapt and adjust for survivability. So whilst they were being reduced, they were putting mechanism in place to do what? To get an unfair advantage to stay in government, even though, as we have seen in recent times, they are in reality a minority government, but the fact that they are the government, then they take that position and act as though they got a huge mandate. So they can't cross, for example, these days, 22 seats, 23 seats. But the opposition, 19 seats, 18 seats, a huge amount in that 41 that it has evolved to be today. And having more people voted for them than the PNM could muster up. The PNM recognizing that it is a numbers game and it is the amount of constituencies that will give you the majority edge, whether it be by 100, 200 or 2. They are prepared, of course, to run the show in that way and pretend to be infallible, and then, of course, engage in atrocious government and governance. Let's go to the lines. A pleasant good night. Welcome to the corridor.
Lennox, it's a pleasant good night again to you and to everybody out there.
Yes,
Are you
indeed.
hearing me good?
Loud and clear, loud
Okay,
and clear.
Lennox,
Loud and clear,
right.
loud and clear.
It takes me back. It takes me back to now we are hearing the Calypsonians and them begging people not to sing about the Indians because they want the Indians to come back to the tent. You see?
There you
I
go.
remember years ago, I remember, I think it was in 2007, when Sugar Aloes came on CNC3. I think that time Dr. Clifford was there. And he begging the Indians to come back to the tents. We wouldn't sing about all they come back because you know what? They knew the value of the Indian dollar. And again, we are hearing it, that somebody attached to the Calypso tents and them begging people not to only sing about the Indians, to sing some anti-PNM Calypsos. Lennox, they have enough Calypso, enough material to sing about the PNM. They don't have to sing about the UNC. But no, they chose to do that because they get buyout. They chose to do it because they are PNM party group number 1. You see now they have to be begging? But this is one Indian ain't going in no Calypso tent again. I made that decision years ago, and I am never going back to any tent again. Because you can't tell me, look at what PNM do to this country and they can't find a Calypso. Come, let's talk about emptying the clip or whatever. Devon Seals make a Calypso about that. All the things that going on with PNM, Devon Seals and see that. No, he go come let's say to empty. Because you know why? It's who most responsible for home invasions. He don't want nobody to empty the clip on them. And until we can recognize that every creed and race find an equal place in this country, they are going to suffer. And I'm saying it big and bold here tonight, across the board, Lennox, you come targeting me, I am going to distance myself, not you, Lennox, not you are talking about, I'm talking in general. Yes. You know, you're targeting Indians, we are going to deal with all, you know. The best thing to do to them is to leave them on their own, right? Have nothing against you. You know, the silent treatment. Give all who want to bash Indians, give them the silent treatment. And as Mikey rightly said, I could always keep coming back to what Mikey said. If you have a problem with one, with a certain individual, deal with that individual. Don't come and broad brush everybody. Don't do it. Right? And something again I wanted to tell you, no, Lennox, but if I remember, I'll call it back.
Certainly.
It was something
you are
to
part and parcel of this, man. You are woven to the entire corridor. Yes.
Yeah, something to do with Rowley again, and all this nonsense that's going on here. Oh, by the way, is the food cards. I understand that, and I heard you say this morning that they gave them the food card, but they didn't activate the food card.
Yeah. So they go, and it has been rejected in the system, in the machines that the groceries will have. Yeah.
And that is how PNM takes good care of you. That's how PNM takes good care of you. Eh? Look at 3 days before Christmas and they couldn't activate the card.
Yeah, boy.
But then again, yeah, there is wicked and wicked, Lennox. But wickedness and evilness don't last forever. It must end sometime. It must
right.
end.
That's right.
Thanks again, Lennox, and have a good night.
Yes, indeed. But it's very rare that I give commendation and tell someone go to the top of the class. But I tell, of course, Miss Santa Cruz to go to the top of the class for that beautiful, realistic assessment of what the situation is as far as this government is concerned. You see, I am nestling and basing the argument from the perspective of the government. It is not by accident I talked about propaganda, because their propaganda will also, of course, focus on that target group as well. Notice, every single day, Rowley get an opportunity, Kamala, and of course the UNC, and of course criminals in the UNC, and of course, why that is happening, he is poaching. He is of course engaged in seeking UNC activists to come across to the PNM. Notice that for the local government election that was pellucid. But I want to also take your mind back to the situation in Tobago. Notice when they presented the Calcutta ship, remember that? And of course, they wiped out, of course, the UNC and of course their partner in Tobago at the time, Top. They wiped them to a frazzle, and that was the beginning of a resurgence of the PNM in Tobago. And of course, it lasted 21 years. Until the people of Tobago, even when Rowley and they plastered the whole of Tobago with, of course, posters with the head of the PDP, I talk about Watson Duke and other senior members in conversation or in the presence of Kamala Prasad Misesa, and that was plastered all over Tobago. It was designed for a specific reason, to of course target the Indian community, but at the same time to tell the African community, you must stay together, because here it is, Watson Duke and they will bring in the Indians in Tobago, and somehow that is dangerous, that is of course pernicious, that is unpalatable, and of course it may well mean the detriment of Tobago. That is what the PNM would signal to these as a result of those kinds of shenanigans. Well, I say all this to say, over time and with comprehensive analysis. I say comprehensive analysis because the result of the elections in Tobago demonstrates that the people of Tobago have awakened to the shenanigans and the bigotry and the racial connotations and blatant and unadulterated overt execution of racial activities and tones. And so they tell Rowley and they, even though he was Tobago, he from Tobago, understand the significance of that victory of the opposition in Tobago. Rowley is from Tobago. It's not that he's a Trinidadian, and of course he's head of the PNM in Tobago. No. Is of Tobago. So that is a deep lesson that all Africans in particular must learn, but the Indians as well must take note as well, that the Tobagonians say enough is enough, and therefore they recognize that their bread and butter, because it is the Indians that would of course patronize their bread and breakfast and their hotels and their guest houses, and of course their various activities that are designed to of course accommodate tourists, whether it's local or foreign. Understand? So they have come. So I take note of what the last caller said, Ms. Santa Cruz, that over time they will get to realize, because it cannot go on indefinitely, and the Tobagonians say enough is enough. The time has reached after 21 years. And there are those, of course, who somehow without the evidence to support it, will suggest that that was a fluke, that somehow they give Rowley and the PNM the credit in spite of the fact that it is 14-1 in the tail, 14-1, and they're lucky they get one. And are you telling me that in Trinidad it cannot happen? Well, I tell you me that the PNM got 33-3 in the tail, 33-3 in 1986. You see, I cannot overlook, and I would like to, of course, share with you and to emphasize or ask you or impress on you the fact that the propaganda is the major element that keeps, of course, a person believing that somehow Rowley and they are not poison, toxic, evil, and of course a cesspool of corruption. Because their propaganda will not relent, and they will not stop from concocting and of course making up. Because as I said, you hear Rowley and they on a daily basis. Don't tell me that the Indian community will not be concerned. Don't tell me that the Indian community will not take umbrage or offense when someone says that they don't have a belly. Because you see, right where the propaganda and the initiation, the genesis of this ideology, just brainwashing of the African community, the genesis of it, the nucleus of it, Balize House. Balize House. We must be cognizant and we must pay attention to those facts, and it's just not bump your gum willy-nilly, helter-skelter, higgledy-piggledy. It requires analysis. A pleasant good night. Welcome to the corridor.
Good night, Lennox. How are you going?
I'm all right. Just trying to be analytical tonight.
Well, I was watching the news last night, and that same thing with the food card business come up. But only that a lot of MPs ain't getting on to get the constituents, especially opposition MPs, right? And this government company who in charge of that, telling people they go get them the food card and them tomorrow to distribute. On a Friday, right? You go get the food card and they go activate it and everything on that day. And after that, when they get on Friday, you want to go and look for these people on Saturday and Sunday. What kind of stupid, kind of brutish kind of thing is wrong with these people in this PNM below, boy? These food cards are supposed to be given out to these people at least a week in advance, so the people can go and shop and buy what they have to buy. They're always on some last minute thing here, just so they want to give people their back pay on the last day of the week, guys, tomorrow kind of thing. Listen, these people that really have no clue on how human beings exist in this country.
Yeah, because they are incompetent. They are clearly unfit for the post, but will die trying because the attraction is the treasury of the country where they are getting the unfair, more than their fair share. That is the only motivation. Go ahead, my friend.
They feed in on the trough, Lennox. They feed in on the trough. They have the family and their friends.
So that is too precious. That is too enticing. That is too, what I consider to be readily available. That is a low-hanging fruit that they don't want to dispense with. But as Ms. Sandra Cruz said tonight, that cannot prevail indefinitely. Tobago has demonstrated that, and I don't want anybody to underestimate. I have my colleagues on the program particularly, and they will of course try to underestimate the significance of that. But of course, I have a different view that is significant. As a Tobagonian, that the Tobagonians rejected. Trinidad must be wetting their own house because Tobago house is on fire, meaning that they have rejected that. And how could it be settled here? It is a firebomb. It is, of course, an obstacle that must be gotten rid of. As Warner said, Trinidad is, of course, Kamala Prasad Bisesa Tobago is a valley, and since the country is Trinidad and Tobago, Rowley will remain with the and stay somewhere within the Bocas or overhead the Bocas. Go ahead, my friend.
Ever since Dr. Rowley came into office and mentioned this thing about necromancy to take out somebody who was opposing him, you see what's going on in this country? You ain't more big business involved in necromancy, all kind of thing. So no wonder this country blighted all these things that's going on here because of all the witches that taking
No
place.
evil you do will not go unpunished. Evil cannot prevail over good. Evil will be punished. And of course, what is unfolding now in the public domain as far as Ninamasi is concerned, I see that their share value has plummeted as a consequence of that kind of what I consider to be rigmarole, superstitious, unscientific approach to business acumen and operations.
Well, a lot of business people will be involved in all kind of things. You don't see it and I don't see it, but they're involved in how you think they get through it, all sorts of things. People that make pack, even big entertainers will make pack with Satan and all kind of things to get successful. People doesn't read between the lines, but afterwards they see they come for their pound of flesh. And sometimes it will be the same people who supporting them will be the ones that have to pay the cake in the end because they make deals. The people who come there and all this other this from Azure can have a wrong thing to go through with that, but I'm telling you, as it says, that's what I know about these things. When Kamala was in power, it had preachers going around saying the woman was in a helicopter throwing milk from before corners of the country. That's why the country is going through all these things. I want to know if you make it so for the four corners of this country, right? If that you were blighting the country now, because I don't know if they say that or not, you can preach them, and saying these things. So they couldn't deal with that. They couldn't deal with it over here now. She's so powerful. How about doing that?
Yes, man. Thank you very much. Of course, it is not by accident we are having this discussion tonight. It is crucial because quite apart from the home invasions target, quite apart from the mattress money scenario, quite apart from the poaching from the UNC of what I consider the ex-layers of the UNC, people who have been rejected, they take them. Quite apart from consistent bombardment that the UNC in government was, of course, wasteful, destructive, greedy, and of course corrupt and so on. The counter argument, and that is where people like myself will now, of course, be hated by the PNM and their sycophants and their operatives, because equal to the regularity with which they attempt, of course, to malign the UNC and the Indian community for their ambition and their ability, of course, to not only manage their affairs, but to, of course, progress, comparatively speaking, and, of course, jealously criticized by the PNM, jealous. When they have the opportunity, of course, with the largest of the state to, of course, engage in competition and facilitate the African communities, particularly those who are ambitious, they see them as a vote bank, nothing else, particularly in contemporary times. And of course, whilst they continue to keep the status quo as far as the Indians is concerned and try to, of course, malign them and, of course, degrade them and to make them believe that somehow they got to what they got without, of course, hard work, and they didn't. And the caller was right when, of course, we see in the cane fields, in the agricultural plots after the disbanding of the sugar cane, that they are still there even up to today and providing, of course, the cash crops, whether it be tomatoes, whether it be dasheen, whether it be, of course, okra, and we can go on and on in terms of melangen, and of course all the cash crops that find itself in the market to which, of course, we subscribe in terms of supplementing our nutritional needs. But I want to conclude with this, because this must have a part two. Must have a part two. But I want to conclude with this. That you see, because people like Rowley and they cannot convince me that the things that they said that the UNC has done, and I can say that I am not satisfied with the way that the UNC has defended themselves. I continue to say so. Continue to defend themselves. And I say so from the perspective that they must be more aggressively forthright. Forthright here doesn't mean honest. What it means is that you must be in the faces of the attacker, those who are trying to spur mud and grime and grit and, of course, sling dirt on the UNC. Because I have examined all of the major planks that could have been subjected to, of course, corruption, nepotism, and cronyism under the UNC, and I have found none. And I keep saying so on a daily basis, and this is the appropriate opportunity to, of course, reinforce and reiterate that I have found none. And don't tell me if you get me vex, you sycophants, as to what basis. Well, let me tell you, none of the major projects, the mega projects, it is called, under the UNC have the PNM been able to bring to the fore to, of course, demonstrate and prove that they were corrupt in the way that they said, whether it be, of course, claiming that the country was running on fumes, a total and absolute figment of Dr. Rowley and Imbert's pernicious, evil, and diabolical imagination. And when one looks at physical plant, when look at physical development, whether it be at the level of box drains, the most the PNM will say is that it was a box drain government, but they never say that the box drain projects were corrupt. Notice that. They talk generically that the UNC is corrupt and that Kamala was the head of a corrupt team of individuals, etc., but could not identify one project. Let me identify them for you. If what Rowley and they were saying, then of course the velodrome, that cycling center, ought to have been subjected to some kind of investigation of a corruption nature. PNM is silent on it. Let's go further. If the aquatic center, that swimming pool that is of Olympic size, was corrupt, how come Rowley and they are silent on it? Let's go further. How come the Children's Hospital, a major project again of the UNC, has not the PNM seek to, of course, malign and of course, prove that it was subjected to corrupt construction? How come? They are silent. How come the DBA UE campus extension has not been subjected to it? In fact, what they have been doing is utilizing it and, of course, opening them, because some of them were closed before the UNC demitted office, and they did so without, of course, having the courtesy, the basic etiquette, the basic quality of human camaraderie and respect to invite them to, of course, open it. No, they open it and then attempting somehow to claim it, and at the same time saying that the UNC was corrupt. How come? But it gets worse, people. How come, even though several of the schools were not completed, talking about the 107 schools that Rowley couldn't find, he being in office, but of course Dr. Tim Gopi Singh found them, and of course I have them here on record. I've shown it to you as well. How come none of them have been subjected, of course, to what? To corruption? And where they bellowed and say that there was corruption, particularly at the level of the education facilities company, when the contractors went to court and delivered their documents as proof that they either did or incomplete or did not get paid, how come the courts are saying that the government must pay? And why it is that as a result of that what I consider to be faux pas. That, of course, reversal in their pernicious perception that they do not want to pay these contractors, over 20 of them. I tell you, sycophants, I tell you, Africans, your best bet, your best ameliorative proclivity, tendency is to join with the Indians, or vice versa, the Indians join with the Africans, in order to make certain that our interests collectively is secured, and that we can learn something from them, in order, of course, to take our position as far as the human capacity development in the country is concerned, and therefore contributing to national development, and stop the blasted intake and being brainwashed by the PNM propaganda. We have already defined propaganda, so I don't need to regurgitate. But of course, propaganda is about misinformation, disinformation, and of course, the PNM is very good at that. And if you want further proof, just read Google's the man who was Hitler's propaganda minister. If you say something that is rude, bad, evil, diabolical, and of course, not true, over and over, there are some people who are going to gravitate because of their gullibility and their willingness, of course, to take on people who they believe will not betray them. And don't tell me you don't understand what I mean by that. You Africans I'm talking about here, you sycophants who are on the live, don't tell me you don't understand that, because of course what Rowley did in 2020 in Sangre Grande, when of course he looked at a basket of course goods and then pull out a hand of bananas and then say he ain't no monkey, and of course indicting you, of course having you empathize, and of course seeking of course to appeal to your base quality, and of course the tribe and the tribalism that he connotated and he inserted into that public outburst, just to be where he is. And you so stupid, because I say stupid here, not directly, but in the context of a book I read that talked about, of course, the people of Germany were stupid when they followed Hitler, and followed Hitler to their detriment and almost to hell. Understand that? That stupidity you're on. To tell me that you are going to watch that man, and because he has a similar texture of hair and color of skin, that he's from Africa, that somehow he is, well, let me tell you something, there's a term for that. It is called pseudo-racism. Pseudo-racism, apart from being a rapist, apart from being a blasted murderer, apart from, and I'm saying murderer here in very specific terms, I'm going to explain that later on, but of course, he uses, of course, his own race to capitalize, exploit, and leave you there in total doldrums and abject poverty. We see it, of course, in Diego Martin. We see it, of course, in East Port of Spain. We see it in Laventille. We see it in Beaton. We see it in Silat. We see it, of course, in other places that have been dominated by the PNM, including, of course, Labre and, of course, Point Fortin. Tell me that you don't understand. That is what he has done. And pseudo-racism is a person or group of persons who, of course, utilize their own race for their personal agenda. They are thieves. They are culpable. They are deceivers. They are responsible for the decadence and the shambolic situation that is Trinidad and Tobago today. And we must face reality. We must face reality. Everything that the other callers would have said tonight is necessary. In fact, all I've done is merely bring it to your conscience that one group of people can be so evil. One group of people can be so evil, a small group. But because they have access to the media, the traditional media, they have access to the various institutions of government, whether it's the police, whether it's the DPP, whether it's the EBC, whether, of course, it is the Police Service Commission, whether it is the Civil Service Commission, whether it is the Public Service Commission, whether it is the Fire Service Commission, whether it be the Prison Service Commission, all of them. But the final arbiter is you and I. Once they cannot convince us that their objective is honorable and, of course, seeking the interests of the country and therefore you and I, then we have a duty and responsibility when the election time comes. The only time we have to adjudicate, we vote the tail out. That's what has to happen. That's what has to happen. It's the only. So I made the point that all of the mega projects, in other words, and I ain't finished yet, I ain't finished yet. I ain't finished yet with spectrum mega projects under the UNC, that the PNM has not been able, of course, to show that they are corrupt. So what they have done, what the PNM has done to suggest and to manifest that illusion, that delusion, that deception, what they have done, well, they target people like Anand Ramlogan and Ramdeen. You understand? Not dissimilar to what they did to Pandey. Understand what is happening? It's a bunch, and let me tell you something. I am not talking here by guess, And every day, this macabre, this what I consider to be barbaric conduct continues in government under this fella and his minions, and they all you know about the protection of Tammy Robinson Regis, of the protection of Darrell Smith, of the protection of Al-Rari in more ways than one, insofar as even he disowned his children, but Rowley say it was his children holding high power rifle. All you know, why you are so damn deceitful? Why all so damn pretensively unrealistic? At the best time of the country, Rowley had admitted it came between 2010 and 2015 when he was asked the question whether people are better off today under him than they were under Kamala Prasad-Bissessa. He simply responded by saying that, listen, milk and honey was flowing. And if milk and honey was flowing under Kamala Prasad-Bissessa, then, of course, that person had to be a fool to, of course, be not better off. Well, what else you want? What else you want? You saw the other side of the coin when he used, of course, from a basket of goodies, the UNC promoting that they are more congenial and they are more loving and they are more humane, etc. And the man take out a bunch of things and then say he no gorilla or he no monkey, the gorilla face that he has, and of course a face that only a mother would love. And I mean the level of ugliness, I think he and Heinz probably could be sitting in the same place in terms of ugliness. But that's another story. Why must you sell yourself short? Why would you miss the opportunity to, of course, advance yourself by a government? One act alone, it should make you understand. When the UNC is in government, nobody could get more than one board appointment, You have, of course, the wife of the speaker, say the wife, the husband of the speaker of the house, who is the wife of the man, head of the oil company of Trinidad and Tobago, that of course is at the center of that devastating 5-person death in a pipeline. Yes, I'm talking about, of course, good girlfriend friend of Rowley, the Heritage Company, and he said George's husband. Huh? Why could we be so insistent on self-imposed suicide political, social, economic, etc. Why would you want to be against development and opportunity for so doing and for your children and your children's children? Why? Why? And Rowley and they could care less. And you don't see that they are your enemies? You don't see that? You don't see that Rowley and the PNM are your enemies? You don't see that along the East-West corridor and from the Martin in the west to, of course, Toko in the east? You don't see that? You don't see it, of course, in the Southwestern Peninsula? They haven't, of course, closed down the petrol train and plunge your life into misery, pain, agony, and poverty. And you don't see that they're mashing up your family life? And, of course, generating, of course, a suicidal pack of individuals? You don't see that? I mean, come on. Come on. So none of the mega projects, they can't fool me. None of the major projects they have been able, of course, to identify as corrupt under the UNC. And therefore, what they have done is, of course, dig deep into their malicious, evil, and wicked in an attempt, of course, to manifest to you the same people who, by now, should know that these fellows are poison and that they have captured government and that they are prepared, of course, to engage in what is called a coup, dominating, of course, the institutions so that they will compromise their own integrity and they therefore keep them in office. But nothing. If there are 20 persons in a constituency and 20 persons vote inside of that constituency, that is it. But we must insist, of course, that international observers are here. This is, of course, one of the objectives that people like myself must engage in. And, of course, we must unrelentingly, of course, affect and attack the EBC, because that is the critical institution that is supposed to be, of course, supervising elections on an objective basis and not for the PNM. And therefore, whether they are PNM sympathizers or not, and whether they have their own preference as far as vote is concerned, just as everybody else, the fact of the matter is the institution itself must not be swayed or in any way pendulum swing in favor of one side or another, but they must be midway and be free and be fair and be, of course, managing the elections in such a way that it could be commendable. But instead, what we see is that they have a proclivity for the PNM and that therefore we must attack them. And 2024 must be a major objective of this and other platforms such as the corridor transformation. People, it is 21 minutes past 10. We started early. We have to continue with this. I think the time has come for us now to disabuse and to, of course, make certain that people understand why Anand Ramlogan is a target. It is merely to make you believe that the UNC and they are corrupt. That's all it is about. So notice that the objective entity pulled back the criminal charge, the evil and corrupt and, of course, malicious, wicked, diabolical and abuse of office and our money. I talk about the Attorney General under the auspices or the consent of Rowley and the entire cabinet, going behind the most ridiculous, and they're hoping that it will last until after 2025, the next elections. That is what that is all about. We have a duty and responsibility to disabuse and to, of course, extrapolate and to explain to you that these are some of the trappings that this group of individuals, particularly led by this miscreant, this pedophile, this rapist, is prepared to do, all about staying out of jail. It's all about staying out of jail because they know the UNC is smarter than them by far. Because if in opposition, they are able, of course, to force them to call an election that they had postponed to this month. I'm talking about the local government elections. You could imagine Kamala and they in government? I with a fellow like me on board as well. You making joke. They making joke. So I tell the African community, give yourself a chance. Give yourself a chance. And the first, when the election is called and the day would have reached, and of course the results are being announced, make certain that in the Martin West, the first seat must be called, and of course in favor of the UNC or any of its allies, that it would have, of course, gone into that elections with as far as an accommodation is concerned. That's what has happened. And let Rowley begin the process of his journey to hell in a jail. That's what has to happen. All what they're doing is to mamaga you and to keep you focused on their nonsense, because they believe that you are subservient to them. They believe that you are their vassal. They believe that you are their slaves. They believe that you are their servants. They believe that it's not them are the servants, but you. And that is how Rowley operates, with his arrogance and his contempt, and of course, and his body language. All of them, including Hines. You see that? With over nearing 600 murders again. And they are comfortable like Papi and making no commentary on that matter, but trying to deflect attention in this time of giving peace and security. But we must have none. We must always be vigilant, because democracy, it is said, requires eternal, consistent, persistent, and clearly focused vigilance. Let me just play quickly, of course, what I wanted to play tonight. Sorry about that, but I was so intrusive with that particular issue, because the burning issue today is, of course, property tax. Listen to Rowley in 2008 when he said that not one of his constituents could afford $100. Today, coming on the heels of COVID and, of course, the devastation of the economy and the downturn and the unemployment hype and the non, of course, augmenting of salaries, and another 14 to 18,000 young people looking for work out of school on top of the 18 before and the year before, etc. You understand what is happening here? Russian roulette, crime situation. Anybody could be the next victim. And we must be frugal, we must be smart, we must be intelligent, and we must be circumspect. Let's hear Rowley when he talks. And I want Andy, I will call Andy, I gave him it today to play it. It must be played right throughout the period of the ground report tomorrow, repeatedly, because it's pretty short, what Rowley said about property taxes, so people are clear. And whether, of course, the Indians have the most expensive properties, and they therefore are targeted and part of the policy of this government to extract, knowing full well that the Africans are less well endowed with, of course, a valuable property. We have to accept that as a fact, and therefore they are the ones targeted. It's not by accident they are targeted for, of course, home invasion. It's not by accident they were targeted for, of course, that dollar cotton versus cotton in exchange for polymer exercise on specious and, of course, false premise. It's not by accident. It's not by accident Rowley and they are, of course, targeting the Indians by, of course, maligning them for the Africans to stay in their corner, not doing any damn thing for the Africans as the African community continues to deteriorate. And, of course, full the prison of the country. Full the prison. Just go to the prison and you will see.
Live from the Hyatt Regency Hotel.
That was the 2015. Listen to Rowley about property tax.
The dreaded property tax. Anybody telling the population that this PNM coming into office, level of discipline, return to London building taxes in phases. The first phase of bringing the tax back was to treat with commercial properties. The second phase was agricultural properties. And the third phase is the residential. So as I speak to you now, arrangements are already in place put by this UNC administration for London building taxes to come back into being after September 7th. That was done by Larry Hawaii when he became Minister of Finance. So for anybody telling the population that this PNM coming into office will bring back that tax is the highest level of dishonesty.
You hear the level of dishonesty with this man? From since 2015, from the beginning, we said that already. But now that property tax is the topic of the day, we need, of course, to play this over and over and over. So the sycophants and they will understand, even though they may have residual recalcitrant tendency. In a state of disbelief and, of course, denial. We have to continue because Rowley and them are listening and they know that we will penetrate to those persons who are reasonable, who are part of that 33% that, of course, vote on the basis of policies, programs, and right and wrong and morality. And then, of course, we need to share that with them. Let's say it again.
From the Hyatt Regency Hotel. The People's National Movement to
dreaded property tax. The dreaded property tax. Anybody telling the population that this PNM coming into office will bring back that tax is the highest level of dishonesty. What this UNC government did a few years ago, they returned to London building taxes in phases. The first phase of bringing the tax back was to treat with commercial properties. The second phase was agricultural properties. And the third phase is the residential. So as I speak to you now, arrangements are already in place put by this UNC administration for London building taxes to come back into being after September 7th. That was done by Larry Hawaii when he became Minister of Finance. So for anybody telling the population that this PNM coming into office will bring back that tax is the highest level of dishonesty.
Live from the Hyatt Regency Hotel. The People National Movement.
Yes, indeed. That was, of course, in 2015 at the Hyatt, when, of course, he was presented the manifesto of the PNM. Yeah. You see how dishonest he is? So that is the forte, that is their modus operandi. They go on the offensive because aggression is the best form of defense. So they say that they wouldn't do it and they're blaming others, and at the end of the day, they're fighting to do it now, and of course it becomes a reality in 2024. And even that in itself is another faux pas, which of course we will examine as well. Another deception, because they're saying that only residential will be, of course, allocated to the regional corporations, and the corporation tax will, of course, be solidly sent to the consolidated fund. So they want it for themselves. But, of course, both categories go to them. Go to them. We're going to examine that, of course, on Saturday, because, of course, as you know, tomorrow I am off. But don't forget, of course, tomorrow morning, Andy, Mikey, and myself, as we continue, of course, with these and other issues. Thank you very much, of course, for staying with me. And, of course, it's now, 10:30. Let me go to bed now, man. I'm tired, but, of course, I am not beaten down. But, of course, I love what I'm doing. And, of course, once I'm seeing progress, I feel comforted. Have a wonderful rest of the night. God bless. Bye-bye.
It was early Christmas morning, I was lying in my bed. When I hear her calling, it was neighbor Mildred. She come over early, say time to have the fete. Please don't say I'm greedy, but I ain't fool yet. My husband gone by his mother and left me in a jam. Look my belly in my hand, neighbor give me piece of ham. Neighbor, oh yo yo, bring out the ham. Neighbor, ay 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 ay, bring out the ham. Neighbor, oh yo yo, bring out the ham. Neighbor, ay 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 ay, bring out the ham. All I want to do is eat, bring out the ham. I don't want to know what I meat, bring out the ham. When I taste good so too fast, bring out the ham. Is then I just feel it's Christmas, bring out the ham. Neighbor, oh yo yo, bring out the ham. Neighbor, ay 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 ay, bring out the ham. Neighbor, oh yo yo, bring out the Viva, oh, yo, yo, bring out the ham. Viva, ay, 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 bring out the ham.